In this video, I'm going to explain my thought process and things that I consider when I'm out in the field taking macro photos. There are a lot of things that go into taking good macro photos, but the most important tips in my opinion are the ones that will help you make better decisions and improve your skills when you are out in the field, and that is the purpose of this video. The first thing I do once I find a subject is I will observe the scene. I will first try and identify what the bug is, and this is important because some species are much more skittish than others, and figuring that part out will just come with experience. The more you go out and photograph various species, the more you will start getting familiar with what to expect when you try to photograph them. The next thing I'm looking for when I'm observing is the position the subject is in and if it is in a good spot. Usually when I find something that is in a bad position or one that my camera can't reach because of surrounding leaves or small branches, for example, then I will leave it alone and move on. Luckily for me, this crane fly that I was photographing here, which are usually very skittish most of the time, was in a good position and I was able to get the shot I wanted without any difficulties. This fly that I was photographing here wasn't in the best spot, and me knowing that most species of flies are very skittish, I knew that attempting to move a leaf so it wouldn't be in the frame would be risky, and I would risk disturbing it and it potentially flying away, so I didn't. But this will be the case most of the time, and in situations like this, all you can really do is try and be as gentle as possible if you are grabbing the plant or whatever the subject is on for extra stability, and just hope that it stays still. Like I said earlier, the more experience you get with photographing various species, you will know what species you can pull off moves, such as moving them to get a better shot or removing nearby elements so they won't be in the frame without disturbing them. And I know that flies, and really most flying insects, aren't one of them. Here I found a very small fishing spider. This specific species can get pretty big, up to 3.5-inch leg span once fully grown, but this one was a baby. Spiders for me are the easiest group of arthropods to photograph, and probably my favorite as well. The shot I was going for was an eye-level portrait stack, and the spider was moving around for a bit, but it eventually sat still long enough for me to get a good stack. For this next subject, I found a caterpillar on these leaves. My original goal was to go for a stack, but as soon as I started taking photos for the stack, it started moving and it was non-stop movement afterwards. So instead, I had to go for some single shots instead. For situations like this, especially if it is a slower moving bug such as this caterpillar, I will try my best and just follow it with my camera while continuously taking shots at the same time. This can be a little difficult at times, but sometimes you will be able to get lucky and maybe even capture your subject making a unique pose while on the move. Here, I was photographing a metallic leaf beetle. My usual camera settings resulted in a very dark background, and I didn't feel like it was the best look for this beetle since its colors were very reflective. To avoid dark backgrounds, I will start by slowing my shutter speed down, and if that's not enough, I will then open up my aperture. And for this case, I had to do both. I slowed my shutter speed all the way down to 1/20th of a second, and I shot at f5.6. But sometimes there's very little you can do to avoid dark backgrounds, but slowing down your shutter speed and opening up your aperture will work sometimes. This next subject is one that I've been wanting to photograph for a while now, which is an earwig, but I just haven't been able to find any while out in the field until now. So I was happy to find this one just chilling on this leaf. Since this was something that I've never photographed before, and I do this with any new species that I've never photographed, is I will start off by taking test shots, such as some overhead shots, before I go for the more interesting compositions. And I do this for a couple of reasons. The main reason is so I can properly ID the species later, and the best way to do that is to take full body shots of the species. The second reason is for just in case the bug decides to run off or fly away, I will at least have something if I start off with an overhead shot. It also gives me time to see how the bug reacts to me and my camera getting closer to it. If I notice that the bug is chill, then that is when I will start going for more interesting angles and compositions. And to my surprise, this earwig stayed put on this leaf, and I was able to go for the shots that I wanted. For the first subject of this session, I found a pretty rare green soldier fly that I have never seen before, but the problem was that it was in a terrible spot. Lots of surrounding leaves around it, which made getting to it difficult. The only way I can get a good quality shot of this fly is to take a chance and slightly bend the leaf a little so I can get a cleaner background. I knew this was risky, but I took the chance anyway, and to my surprise, because I was most definitely expecting it to fly away, it stayed completely still the whole time, and I was able to get the shots I wanted. These are easily some of my favorite shots of the year so far, and taking risks like this will work occasionally, probably about 50% of the time, so don't be too bummed if your subject runs off or flies away when you take chances like this, because it will happen more often than not, depending on what you are trying to photograph. One of the most important aspects of a good macro image is a good composition. This is what I'm thinking about the most while I'm out shooting. Here, I was shooting a cicada, and for this shot, I was going for a side angle shot. When I'm going for side angle shots especially, I like leaving some empty space in the frame so later when I'm editing, I have room to crop the image for an even better composition. If you fill the frame up, then you won't have any room to crop, and in my opinion, frame filling side angle shots don't make for interesting macro shots most of the time. Back when I first got into macro, these were the kinds of shots I would take. This was before I knew anything about composition, so I would just crop most of my shots tightly. When thinking about the compositions you want to go for, first think about the rule of thirds, which is a composition guideline that places your subject in the left or right third of an image, leaving the other 2/3 more open. I use this style for most of my macro shots nowadays, but every image doesn't have to be a rule of thirds style shot, especially if your goal is to shoot some close-up portraits. These kinds of shots will work well when you place your subject at the center of the frame because all the focus will be on your subject and its tiny details. Me personally, I like to include either the foreground or some of the background in my portrait shots now because I feel like it gives the images more context. I'm not saying that my way of composing my shots is the only way you should do it, because it's a preference thing at the end of the day, but the important thing to remember is to leave yourself some room in the frame while you are out shooting so you can have room for cropping later. Another thing to pay attention to is any background elements, if there's any. You don't want to have anything distracting or something that will make your backgrounds feel cluttered, because it will take the focus away from the subject. It's not always possible to get the background you want, but sometimes just a simple angle change will make a huge difference. And also, if you shoot at a higher magnification, then that will blur out the background even more. But the only downside to that is your depth of field will be even more shallow. Here, I was photographing another cicada, but this one was freshly molted and his exoskeleton was right behind it. I wanted to include it in the shot because I felt like it would add a lot to the photo, and I really liked the way this one turned out. So when you are out taking photos, just ask yourself, will these elements add to the photo? And if not, either try shooting from a different angle or try removing the distracting elements if possible. Something I try to do for most of my subjects I photograph is I try not to limit myself to just one good shot. I always try to take as many photos as I can, while also trying out different angles and compositions as well. Doing this just gives me more options to choose from, and it also gives me a chance to get more creative when shooting. So I do recommend you to not settle for the first good shot you take. If the opportunity is there, then keep shooting and get more creative, because you may end up liking all the other shots more than the first one. The main two things to remember from this video is to get a basic understanding of the subjects you are photographing. Pay attention to how they behave for future references. There are apps and websites that can help you ID bugs and other things. I use iNaturalist to help me ID subjects. And the second thing is to have a good understanding of good compositions and angles to go for. Once you have a good understanding of both of these, everything else will just come naturally as you put more time and effort into your photography. I hope this video was helpful for you, and if it was, then consider leaving a like and subscribing for more content like this. I'll catch y'all in the next one.